Wherever you are, close your eyes. Unless you're driving or flying a plane, then absolutely don't close your eyes. Or if you're cycling, don't do that. Actually, keep your eyes open. Yeah. And think, with your eyes open, about winning. Feels pretty great, doesn't it? And now you can do it anywhere with the National Lottery app. Download the National Lottery app today. Play anywhere, win anywhere.
You've heard of Stamps.com, you've probably heard of Postage.org, you probably haven't come across Mailing.net, but it's time that you were introduced to the revolutionary new concept, CarrierPigeon.ca. Freshly picked Canadian carrier pigeons available in a choice of colors, feather widths, gender, and non-gender specific models are set off from our rooftop cages above the darling city of Winnipeg to anywhere in the western northern U.S., parts of Ohio, and we once found one of our birds scurrying round and around outside a sandwich shop as far south as Pittsburgh. If you're not in any kind of a hurry and you're the sort of old-school, plaid trouser-wearing, ironic pork pie hat-loving, superior vinyl-bragging sort, then you'll love CarrierPigeon.ca. All of our birds are fresh, organic, gluten-free, non-GMO, hand-raised, grass-fed, artisanal, freshly rubbed, and have access to Canada's extraordinarily popular free healthcare. Just write down on our easy-to-use website what message you want to send, where you want to send it to, your favorite hockey team, at least 3 tragically hip rare album tracks, and your favorite member of Kids in the Hall, and we will happily, for the reasonable and handcrafted amount of $39.99, send your message of 140 characters or less within 13 days to most of the places you may have heard of in the northern western United States. Failing that, we know a young chap named Timmy with an old rusty Volkswagen, lots of time on his hands, and what he lacks in talent, he makes up for in eager readiness, who will drive your message anywhere it needs to go. CarrierPigeon.ca. It's the personal touch. None of our pigeons have in any way been personally touched, molested, or harassed by any of our expert handlers, who all have degrees in obscure French Renaissance woodwind instruments and abide by the 1987 Glove Accord, signed by Prime Minister Brian Mulroney himself.
You're listening to the After Movie Diner with your host, Jon Cross.
All right, hello and welcome to the After Movie Diner. And on this week's show, I am incredibly happy to finally be talking to the wonderful Marcus Pinn from the website Pinland Empire. And also people will know him on Twitter as the wonderful chap who does all the side-by-side comparisons, often between either old or foreign movies and modern and contemporary movies that we all sort of know and love, just to kind of show that history of... I don't think it's to show imitation, is it? It's to show
sometimes
that there is a cinematic language. I mean,
but that's the bigger picture, the cinematic language. Yeah.
Right. So, Marcus, welcome to the After Movie Diner. Real pleasure to have you on.
No, man, likewise. You see, I'm happy. I've been, a mutual friend of ours, Doug Fry. I discovered who you were and your show through Schlock Treatment, which is R.I.P. And then I listened to it, and it was one of those things where, I became a podcast junkie around 2014, and then I discovered your podcast, and it was just movies, diners, 2 of my all-time favorite things.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my fiance about it, because there's a lot of not even to just put you over flatter you, but there's a lot of effort that goes into the podcast, the music numbers, the interludes, all that stuff. It's impossible to listen to every podcast, but I listen from Rogan and Maron to I listen to them all. So
Sure. Yeah.
There's definitely more effort put into this podcast than your average one. So I definitely I appreciate it very much.
And it was funny because thank you so much. It's very kind of you to say. And I feel like there was definitely a point in time, there were when I think back, there was 30 episodes where I did a unique song at the end of every show about those films. And I just don't, nowadays, I just don't really have the time to necessarily do that. Luckily, I have kind of a back catalogue of music that I can put on, so hopefully every show there's a song that people haven't heard too much that hopefully they can go and discover. But thank you ever so much, man. And my
judgment too. I always listen to, just like I listen to music, I have favorites, episodes, because it's weird. 50% if I listen to a podcast, like I'm done with it, but then there's like a collection of podcast episodes I'll listen to multiple times. So there's definitely a couple, like the Bill Lustig one, the first interview you did. I listened to that quite a bit, just because I can hear the kind of surprise in your voice when he just kind of springs on you. He's like, "You should host this thing I'm doing." And it was just
insane.
like, oh, because I kind of know that feeling where it's just like an artist you admire, and it's just like I could definitely. I mean, you didn't go total like fanboy or anything like that, but there was definitely like a surprise, like a pleasant surprise in your voice. That was really cool.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Bill Lustig was definitely someone. I don't know if I've ever told the story of kind of what happened after I did the Maniac Cop 2 screening, but Bill Lustig was definitely someone who was like happy that I was there and like wanted me to be there, but sort of non-communicative in terms of the organization leading up to it, and then after it was finished, he had another screening on the Saturday night. I think I did the Friday night. He had another screening on the Saturday night, and I couldn't gauge him at all. Like I couldn't, and I sort of said to him, I was like, "Do you want me to come back tomorrow night? Like, was this okay? Do you want me to do it again?" Like, and he was like, "I don't mind, man. Whatever you want." Like he was just he was very kind of non-committal. And I remember I paid for my ticket to the screening that night because he hadn't emailed me and said, there'll be a ticket at the front door or anything like that. So when I saw him in the theater, because he's very recognizable, I went over and I said, "Oh, hey, Bill, so I could come in and I'm going to sit down here, but like whenever you need me, just call me up," and stuff like that. He goes, "Did you get the ticket?" And I was like, I bought a ticket." He was like, "I left a ticket for you at the front." And I'm like, "Okay, you didn't say it." So it was kind of interesting. Like, he's very old school and very kind of New York about stuff. So, and I come from a place where I have to have everything ironed out and organized and communicated, just because of my insecurities, I guess. So it was interesting, and I was flattered, but
how are you? Yeah.
Great, thank you.
You first?
I'm going to have the popcorn shrimp. And I'm going to have the disco fries, please.
Okay.
What are disco fries?
They are cheese and gravy fries, and it's particularly good here. The gravy is particularly good here.
Oh, well.
You want regular fries? I also have onion rings, sweet potato fries, or waffle fries.
No, the regular the regular way you do it is great. You do have a choice of cheeses, though. I remember, right?
Yeah. I have American, Swiss, mozzarella, cheddar.
I think the mozzarella is the one I really like. I think that would be great. Thank you.
The burger with bacon.
Cheeseburger?
No cheese, please. Yeah, hamburger with bacon, extra crispy. And I'll do the disco fries, but minus the gravy. So I guess it's cheese fries. Yeah. Can you do those on the waffle as opposed to the regular? Yeah. Perfect. And I guess when you bring the food back, I'm going to be ordering another meal for my lady to bring home. So.
Okay, so you want the hamburger, you want the deluxe lettuce, tomato, and fries. You want on top of the fries to put the cheese?
Yes, please. So then and a side of barbecue sauce for the fries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Cool.
Excellent.
And like I said, when you come back, I'll have another order for to go.
Don't worry.
So, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So. Talk about yourself, because everyone's bored of me talking about myself.
Sure.
Let's. So, when did you start your website, and even before that, when did your love of film come out?
Okay, well, let's go in order. My love of film came out, I guess, through my parents. Really, one being an only child. It's hard to believe, if you know me through my site or Twitter, it's hard to believe that, like, I went outside as a kid, but I definitely did.
Right.
But at the same time, yeah, I was an athlete and all that stuff. But when you don't have siblings, and it's just you and your parents, and there's a lot of, like, downtime.
Yeah.
So a lot of that was just, I would sit in front of the television. Like, I remember, we didn't have cable. I was born in Queens, but I pretty much grew up in Massachusetts, a town called Amherst. And right when we moved to Amherst in '88, it was, like, HBO, Showtime, Cinemax, and the movie channel. It was this package deal, so I got all four.
Yeah.
And my parents would always go to sleep and leave one of the movie channels on, and I didn't want to wake them up, so like I would just kind of go and just sit at the bottom. The bed was really high up, so I would just sit in front of the, whatever movie was on, it had to be on. 9 times out of 10, it was HBO. And this is a period when HBO, between the late 80s, early 90s, they would just have a block of stuff. They didn't really deviate. It was just, but the stuff they would play, the block that they would play late at night, there was a lot of random stuff. So I would watch, like, Bob Balaban's Parents or Heathers or Meet the Applegates. Like, all those kind of random movies would play, like, late at night. So then And then over the years, it just kind of grew. Like, for example, on my street where I grew up, there was a video store at the bottom of the hill and a movie theater at the top of the hill. So that I think that explains a lot too.
Yeah. Of
so,
course.
Yeah, and then
The price is American cheese, right?
Oh no, cheddar.
Cheddar cheese.
Yes, please.
And how do you want to cook the burger?
Medium, please. Thank you. And the video store that I used to go to down the street from where I lived, it was called Video to Go. Outside of new releases, it was organized by Director, which is a big deal. They had this thing, you could rent 5 movies for 5 nights for $5. So I used to take advantage of that quite a bit, especially during the summer.
Sure.
And then around the MySpace days of like the mid-late 2000s, they had this like blog section that a lot of my movie friends would write.
Yeah.
And I started a blog there, but then MySpace kind of fell out, people stopped going.
Yeah.
And then one of my old bosses at an old job was like, just start up a blog spot. And then I remember starting up a blog spot and just writing my random thoughts about movies, because at that point I'd go to like the New York Film Festival and wasn't going to Toronto yet. But just writing about movies. And then that was in 2010. In my second year doing the blog, I remember I wasn't getting a lot of views, wasn't getting a lot of reads, so I wanted to do like, what can I do to, something interesting. And then I went to go see Paul Schrader talk at the Lincoln Center. Yeah. And he wrote this article on Marie Antoinette, and in that article they were comparing like interior shots from Marie Antoinette to like older films like Last Year of Marienbad and just like grand interior shots. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, like showing influence basically. Right. And then I did that for this one review on this Todd Haynes film called Safe, and then it just slowly grew to an obsession where like you said, it's like the cinematic language, but I kind of break it down in different categories. Like sometimes I'll compare shots just to be silly, like they do look fairly identical. Yeah. But I know for a fact that like one director or both directors have nothing to do with either. It's just a funny coincidence.
Right, there's no way that they would have necessarily gone, oh, I want to make it like that shot.
Then there's others though, and this is when I get a little testy when people kind of contest or say like, oh, this is stupid, or how do you know they were influenced? Because I read a lot of books on filmmakers. So when Jim Jarmusch says, I'm very influenced by Bresson or Wim Wenders, or when Paul Thomas Anderson I also listen to a director's commentary track. So when, with his own words, Paul Thomas Anderson is like, oh, I totally stole the shot from Robert Altman. It's like, there's not really anything to debate. One filmmaker said he took it from someone else.
I've also heard, I think it's Bill Murray when he's talking about Rushmore, and he says that there are shots in it that Wes Anderson would completely tell the DP, I want that shot from Goodfellas, I want that whatever. Now when we watch it, it's a camera panning across an audience or whatever it is. We don't necessarily connect it. But like Wes Anderson is just saying, however Scorsese moved the camera in that shot, let's do that for this. Now, they're applying it to two completely different things. Wes Anderson tends to look at the minutiae of things, and Scorsese is often like blowing it out into a big, colorful widescreen. But
exactly, or even the plot. And this is when because I think when I compare certain movies, usually someone is a fan of one filmmaker, and they take it a little personal, like, oh, what are you saying, they copied? And it's like, well, maybe they did copy the shot, but the movies are totally different. It doesn't. I'm not saying it as a negative thing. No. And I think not a lot of people. Twitter shows me a lot of love. There's the Facebook film community gets very testy and a little prickly, and it's just like, so like Christopher Nolan copied a shot from Kubrick. It's like their movies are totally different. It's not like he's still his own filmmaker, And
there's only so many ways you can move a camera, you know what I mean?
And that too.
And not everything, like I remember I've said this a lot, but sort of after the Evil Dead generation grew up, and I know I mention that film a lot, and it must annoy people, but at the same time, like, there are a lot of things in that film that have come to pass 20, 30 years on that to call
the Remy cam,
a lot of
for one.
So not every camera movement is going to be as obvious as something like a Raimi camera shot, because Raimi kind of does very kind of obvious, purposeful camera shots and uses very obvious, purposeful lenses, so that when someone imitates them, you're like, okay. But there are other ones, like I said, with Wes Anderson, it's just a panning shot really, or just a tracking shot. But for him, he's like, that's the bit in Full Metal Jacket where they're going through the rubble, and the guy with the camera's like, keep moving. Like, he's doing that, but he's doing it for a play or whatever else is happening. So there's kind of ways to do that, and like you say, it's not no one's imitating it. I mean, I think the imitation thing gets difficult because then you have filmmakers like Tarantino and filmmakers like that who, are very original, but at the same time are known imitators and known.
But I like to think he even knows it. It's not. I mean, well,
right.
See, I don't fully, because sometimes I read interviews and it's like I don't know if he's especially post Inglourious Bastards. I don't know if Tarantino's intentionally trolling with some of the, but it could also just be 2 decades of being frustrated with a lot of the same questions and accusations. So maybe Tarantino is being a jerk on purpose. But I also just think too, like
I
you
think
said,
if he was more humble about it, I think if he talked more, I think if he talked more to his influences, like. I was a big fan of the Beatles, and when they talked about kind of the music that influenced them, you're like, okay, you guys can be as big as you like, but you're name-dropping Chuck Berry, you're name-dropping Elvis Presley, you're name-dropping Fats Domino, whoever it is who inspired them. And I just wish Tarantino would be more like that and less like, hey, I fucking did it and I'm the best person ever. But anyway,
I think to add to that, I think he feels a lot of this stuff is so obvious that he's a jerk about it. So he's like overdoing it. He's the older he gets, he's like the guys in High Fidelity, just like the movie version. I think to some degree. I really do think that. But I keep repeating what you said. I like how you're just saying the language of cinema, because I also think like influence is kind of important. Just like if I love a filmmaker, I want to know what movies that they liked and if they came out in their own work, and just history is important. Like, the first moving images, in the early 1900s, like it's nice to see that common thread between then and 2017 and beyond. I think that's really cool. I think a lot of people think that's cool too.
I think Scorsese said either in a recent interview or probably said it in multiple interviews, but he's like, I didn't come up with any of it. Like, I didn't come up with any of it. He's like, he's such a knowledgeable guy about cinema that he can point to 50 films you may have heard of, or like some people may have heard of, but like in general, the general populace hasn't heard of. And he's like, I took it from there, I did it from that. Like, he's like, everyone just steal from the best, and everyone has said, like, when I first started doing the podcast, and again, I didn't expect to necessarily have an audience or anything, so it didn't really bother me, but I'd written comedy for years that was always heavily influenced by Monty Python and Fry and Laurie and people like that from the UK, because that's what I grew up watching. So when people said years later it was Python-esque, instead of my 12-year-old self or my 15-year-old self back when I was writing would be like, no, it's all original. But by the time I was like in my 30s and doing the show, I was like, yeah, it is. It totally is. Like, I love silly words and mad premises, and it's totally the same. And I think that's why I think sometimes Tarantino can frustrate me, is that I think there should be an adult part of yourself that is able to recognize whatever that is. Like, if you do something creative, there should be a part of you that kind of acknowledges the...
I completely agree, and especially with the success that he'll always have fans. So it's not like if he says, oh, this obscure reference came from me. No one's gonna like you or dislike you. You know what I mean? Because I think he has like you said, I got a lot of issues with a certain era of Tarantino, but like more the recent Tarantino. But he's still, like, his knowledge. It'd be cool if he would just stop being a jerk and just talk more about, like, you know what I mean? Like, you obviously love movies way more than the average person, so...
And it's, that's the side I like about it. But, you've been doing these side by side, so how do you... Because some of the movies that you're doing, I certainly have never heard of, and or they're ones that are fairly obscure. How are you, like... sourcing the images? How do you do it daily? How is it that you know what you're going to do? Like, I get
into periods where I do it daily, but then, like, basically a lot of times over the weekend is when I like to stock up. Like, I stay up late on the weekends, and unless if it's a movie that I've seen before, I pay half attention. If it's like a new movie I've been waiting to see, like, I'm full attention. But if it's like an old movie that's like one of my favorite, like the movie we're going to be getting into, which I can kind of quote a good portion of it, I'll have my laptop open and just kind of like, and just think like, oh, this movie reminded me of that. Or like, if I think of just, I guess how my mind works, I just think of 2 shots. If I'm on the train, I'll just write them down real quick, and then I'll remember the scenes, and then and also like add too that a lot of times, especially recently, when I post like a side-by-side image, a nice majority of the time I do put 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of writing with it, to not just like, because sometimes you do have to back it up, like just to say, hey, this looks like that, but maybe put a link to my site or other sites that I write for, like the Pink Smoke or Cut Print Film or something like that, and just read why I think that is, versus just, sometimes I do, sometimes it's so obvious, no words are necessary, but sometimes it is important, because you could be, it's one of those things where like, sometimes I'll get flack because it'll be like like a close-up of like an eyeball next to a close-up of an eyeball, and there's a million movies like that. But I'll write, in my link to my review, it'll be like, yeah, but these two particular scenes had the same exact atmosphere, the same exact thing was going on when these shots were done. So
and it's like, I thought the one you did with Rambo and Shian Dandaloo was incredible, because I'm that it looked so wonderful side by side, and Stallone is such an intellect outside of his brawn. Like, the guy knows art stuff.
Absolutely.
The guy knows darling.
I agree.
That you just kind of like wonder, that could quite possibly have been something that he was like, I've seen that. This would be a great way to juxtapose the, what's going on. So who knows? But I love that, and I think that, a while back, what was it, about a couple of years ago, the guys started doing. There's a few guys that I kind of put in the group of celebrating cinema through the still image, and there's the this is not porn guy who does a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, and there's the One Perfect Shot.
Oh yeah, they're
and then there's you, and the One Perfect Shot always bothered me a little bit, because I'm like, I totally respect what it is. It's like celebrating that one shot, that moment, that cinema can be art, that film can also be, a film is also a series of photographs just played very quickly through the light. So I always respected that, but at the same time I'm like, dude, you literally just put in your Blu-ray of Close Encounters of the Third Kind and went, boom, that one. And
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So there was a part of me where I'm like, damn it, why didn't I think of that? There's always that jealousy of it as well.
I get a little cynical.
I'm being totally cynical about it, but yeah.
Only a note, like I said, like Twitter shows me lots of love, and it's brought a lot of, ultimately too, a big part of it, I know it's cool, so I like to direct traffic to my site so people can get my reading and stuff.
No, I was about to say that what you do, I think, is what you do I get way more out of than, and I'm not just saying that because you're here, I'm saying what you do I get way more out of in terms of a conversation, in terms of the realization of the language of film, but also the beauty of the shots, the beauty of the photography, whatever it is. So I think I get way more out of that, and I think you put way more effort and time into it and thought into it than necessarily just going, I love that shot from 2001, A Space Odyssey that everyone's seen.
No, I was just getting ready to say, like, when people are like, there's a million movies with similar shots like this, and it's just like, and then like, I remember a couple times I replied to a guy like, maybe I should just post a single picture of the monolith from 2001, and then I'd get 50 likes and a million, retweets.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it always frustrates. We're always trying to do stuff like that, but I think, especially like you say, drawing people back to your site and having a deeper conversation from those images, I think that's brilliant, and I do love it, and I do follow that.
Awesome. Appreciate that.
So I do like that. So yes, with people getting the idea of who you are, and obviously we can do the links and pimp your show at the end, but let us move on to the film that we're covering, which, very interesting, is an old favorite of yours and a first-time viewing for me.
Oh, that was your first time?
It was a first-time viewing.
So hang on a second, let me just...
That is perfect, thank you.
Put in an order for my lady, because I know she's listening, so...
All right.
Yeah, this is to go. Can I get the chicken souvlaki platter? No onions, please.
Okay.
With the, that comes with a salad?
Yeah.
Okay, with the salad.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, no onions, please.
No onions, sure.
You heard that? I said no onions, because I know you're listening.
Okay.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know, I just felt like Tapeheads is like a...
Yes,
movie
the film
that
we're
would be in your
talking
canon.
about,
That's that's surprising.
Well,
Or great too. It's always great to discover new old movies or old new movies, however you want to.
yeah.
Closing time. Josh, losing those jobs is the best thing that ever happened to us. Free to pursue our destiny.
What, abysmal failure?
Negativity festers in you, man. How'd you ever get to be my friend? Ooh, check this out.
Stupid, inane, vapid, mind rot, stench, babble.
Yeah, that's all right. You could do that.
I could do better than that.
right! You could! Where's that video you made tonight? Quick, give it to me. Easy, easy. Did you know that you're a creative genius? All right. Maybe he's not a genius, but he certainly is creative. You know what you are? He's an artist.
Unemployed.
All good artists are unemployed until they find a manager. A guy like me who will mold their talents into cold, hard cash. A guy who will tap into that vast store of potential that lies dormant beneath that groggy little exterior.
You're so full of shit.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of people out there who are full of shit making money, and I'm not going to be the exception. This is our ticket, and you are going to start making music video.
It's funny because certainly the film student in me, when I was in my 20s, would have been like, well, the 70s were the greatest decade of cinema and da-da-da-da-da.
I had that mode. I was in that mode before.
And never hugely pretentious, but like certainly my two favorite films are still, Taxi Driver and Apocalypse Now.
No, Taxi Driver is one of my, it's in my top 5.
Yeah. So if people say to me, what is your favorite movie? I go, do you want my fan favorite answer, or do you want my highbrow thinky answer? My highbrow thinky answer is Taxi Driver Apocalypse Now. My fan favorite answer is Evil Dead 2. But
I think those all go in the same.
No, they do.
I don't know if those should be separated.
They're all about lonely men fighting demons. That's what they're all about.
That's funny.
If there is the connection, and I all came across them when I was 18, a lonely man fighting my own demons.
Awesome.
But no, so but then recently, I think when I was a teenager, when the 80s tried to kind of make a comeback, I was like, oh, the 80s were awful, the music was awful, the hair was awful, everything was awful. Now, as I got a bit older, and obviously the 80s are more like the 60s are to me now than the 60s were back in the 80s.
80s cinema, it was kind of like taking a step back. It was like a beautiful disaster, almost.
Yes, completely.
It was just like a crash, like a clash of stuff, basically.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's just be clear that is ketchup you're hearing and not farts. I repeat, not farts.
Yeah, there was too much going on, but the benefit of that, with hindsight, where we're not having to live in it, I think, and we're not having to experience the Milli Vanillis of the world, let's say, or the what was the pop star over here that everyone hates, like Debbie Gibson or whatever, Was she 80s? She was 80s, right?
She was definitely 80s. Okay. She was only the 80s.
Only the 80s. And we had our same back in the UK, like whatever it was. So people who came and went. Now that we can be far enough away from it, and that stuff doesn't matter, you can actually start to pick and choose and highlight like the stuff that came out of the 80s and what defines the 80s and what makes the 80s the further we get away from it. And the thing is, I've seen a lot of young Jon Cusack stuff, The Sure Thing was like a big fan of that.
The Savage Steve Holland stuff. All the Savage Steve Holland stuff.
Yeah. Obviously the famous Cameron Crowe one, which my brain is blanking on the title.
Say Anything.
Say Anything, right? Big fan of. But there were a couple like Better Off Dead and Tapeheads that I was totally aware of, but I just never put in. Like it just never came around. Yeah. Better Off Dead was certainly readily available on DVD once that format came out, and then again on Blu-ray. But like Tapeheads didn't really have that reinvent or that like second lease of life. Like there was a certain time where knowing Better Off Dead over Say Anything or over The Sure Thing made you very cool. But Tapeheads never really got that lease. So I finally found it on, I forget, is it HBO streaming or Showtime streaming? One of those two channels has it.
That makes me happy.
And the other night, I was sat there and I was like, I just want to put on just a dumb, fun movie. And I saw it and I was like, Cusack's always good. Like, Cusack is always good. I can always watch Cusack do pretty much anything. And goofy 80s, silly Cusack, totally down for that. I had no idea what I was about to let myself in. So that was me. That was my first time seeing it. Take me back to your first time seeing it and what appealed to you about it.
First time seeing it, I rented it in high school. I feel like it had to have been my senior year. Yeah. And I remember I went into it blind. I just remember the VHS box cover. It looked kind of cool. And then I turned it over, and it looked even cooler. It was actually like an image that wasn't even actually in the movie. It was like a behind-the-scenes picture of them, and they were like, John Cusack had like a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and then like at the bottom of it was like the Swanky Modes. So it's like these two guys in this like these weird matching suits. And then I was like, it's about, you know, music video. They kind of described it wrong. It was like two music video directors, whereas technically one is a director and one is kind of like an agent who's trying to, you know.
Oh, it's all delicious. Yeah, thank you.
Very good. Who's trying to like manage his friend, but also support his friend. But whatever. I'm nitpicking. But I just remember being like, what is this? And that's why I rented it, which was why I rented a lot of VHS tapes growing up. Like, what is this about? And I watched it, and immediately I thought it was funny. Like, I enjoyed it, like, right from the start. And then, it's also a movie that it's, like, so many great cameos from, like, some that people don't even catch. Like, because this isn't the deepest cut of all movies, but it's still one of those movies where you find someone who's seen Tapeheads. It's like, oh, Tapeheads.
I think it's a deep cut for Cusack fans. I mean,
yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's not necessarily a deep cut out of all 80s movies. There are certain rarer, weirder ones. But I think it's up there.
But then, like, to have, you know, Dougie Fresh, Ted Nugent, Jello Biafra, who some people don't even catch, who's at the very end of the movie, like, all just that rare Weird Al. You know, all those people are in it. It's just such a, you know... And still kind of, I don't want to sound like the old man, but like represented this time where like, you know, the whole music television thing showed these really cool videos, which in itself were kind of like the movie Tapeheads. Like a lot of music videos, and especially in the 80s, and kind of in the 90s, were just so random. Random. And Tapeheads is a very random movie. Like it has a plot, but it's also really, really random.
Right. So, and there's no real, like, there is a supposed threat, but I don't think, because of the goofy nature of the movie, I never felt the threat throughout the movie. I was like, they'll figure it out.
Yes, yeah.
And I think sort of the closest, in a weird way, to the movie in a kind of contemporary fashion, like a reference people might know if they haven't seen the film, it's sort of like Wayne's World meets Be Kind Rewind.
Oh my God.
Sort of, I
like that. Well, you could have just stopped at Wayne's World, but then like combining it with the Be Kind, it's very true.
It's sort of got that, or certainly I think Be Kind Rewind owes a lot to Tapeheads. It really does. It's almost like the art house navel gazing version of it.
Sure.
In a weird way.
That's really good.
But no, I mean, you know, and it's both about sort of, there's certainly themes of like the desire of creativity and you know, art versus commerce and you know, junk like that is in the film. So basically the plot, as you sort of highlighted, but John Cusack plays the sort of fast-talking, have-a-go, gung-ho, wacky friend to Tim Robbins' more nervous, put-upon...
he's the artistic one.
Artistic friend. And they both have jobs as security guards, which they promptly lose when Cusack thinks it would be a great idea on Tim Robbins' birthday to invite everybody to show up at this office building or wherever it is to totally trash the place. And then they film it using the security cameras and overdubbing music to it and putting wipes and various other stuff in between it. It's a whole like convoluted beginning, but it's kind of fun, and it has that holdover from like that punk anarchy aesthetic. It has like that holdover to just like, you know, the 80s are the times where the kids with their parents' credit card went wild, you know what I mean? Now, in this movie, neither of them have their parents' credit card, but they happen to share a loft with a woman who does.
A woman with a rich family, who I always thought was very cute, by the way, growing up.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Very cute.
So, Tim Robbins when he loses his job, gets kicked out by his parents, who have always thought of him as a layabout and useless. They see an ad for loft space. They go along, and it is owned by this crazy woman who does mad, destructive art. Blowing a hole in a canvas with a shotgun is how we meet her the first time round. And so they're all set up, and then they try and go out into the world and try and make music videos. along the way, they do possibly the best advertisement for fried chicken ever.
Roscoe's. Yep.
Roscoe's fried chicken. And also get embroiled in a wrong tape plot with a politician running for president who also has very weird sexual fetishes.
Absolutely.
And it all builds to a climax. And along the way, we meet the Swanky Modes. So tell us all about the Swanky Modes, Mark.
So, yeah, the two characters in the film, played by Jon Cusack and Tim Robbins, their mutually favorite group. It's this kind of like old school soul R&B group called the Swanky Modes. It's a duo of guys, you know, I guess, what's a good comparison? Like a Four Tops kind of.
Well, I mean, I always think of Sam and Dave, because, I mean, one of them is Sam,
yes,
is obviously is Sam Moore, right? But and who plays the other
I don't
Mode?
remember who.
Damn it. I know him as well.
The Swanky Modes would be soul bluesman Sam Moore and Junior Walker.
Who, you know, they were, you know, awesome back in the day, but nowadays they're just kind of like down and out. They don't have the career they used to have. They're playing in a, you know, a weird. They come across them one day at like a weird country rock western bar, and they had to open for this group played by Fishbone. And yeah, so it's like they're basically their favorite childhood group is now down and out, and now, so part of the plot now is they want to try to direct a music video for the Swanky Modes to, you know, as a vehicle to get them back into the spotlight, you know, which is what I always kind of appreciated about also Jon Cusack's character, because he's definitely, like you said, he's like this fast-moving, like, kind of like all about the money, all about business, like, whatever. But there still is, like, throughout the movie, there's these times where he interjects and, like, encourages Tim Robbins' art, or, like, he still cares about the Swanky Mode. So it's, like, it's an interesting mix of a character. He's a total 80s guy, like, without hearing him talk, you just look at him, oh, you're just like an 80s sleaze guy, just like, hey, come on, hey. But he still cares about art at the same time, which is kind of rare, you know, I think, for a character like that. So
definitely. And the pencil-thin mustache is like a character unto itself.
Yeah.
When I saw that he was going to defiantly rock that mustache throughout the whole movie, I was like, wow, that's a really interesting character. Because he looks, in the UK we have a term, spiv. Mm-hmm. And he looks like a spiv, or I suppose the equivalent would be a second-hand car dealer, or a market stall guy who would be selling stuff, what we call like off the back of a lorry, but out of the back of a van, essentially, like knocked off merchandise.
Yep.
He looks like that. And in other words, he's very spivvy, greasy, sleazy.
Very greasy.
But he's put a suit on because he's trying to project respectability when really he's just a scumbag.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yep.
So he's very spiv-like in that regard to me. But like you say, the one thing he holds on to above everything, and the few moments that sort of Tim Robbins gets to cut loose and relax from his sort of nervous, twitchy persona, is when the Swanky Modes comes up. Mm-hmm. They'll always have the Swanky Modes.
Yeah.
And, you know, as someone who grew up loving Sam and Dave and rhythm and blues and soul and that kind of music, like the fact that was going to be one of the driving forces throughout the movie was just a joy to me. Like, I absolutely loved that. Yeah.
Well, no, it could have totally just, I don't know, some like random obscure like rock band or something like that.
Right.
It's just such a random, for like, you know, like suburban kids to like idolize this kind, you know, this group. So it's again, it's just another random touch about that movie.
Yes, I mean, nothing, it's odd because nothing about the movie really makes sense, and it's going to be sort of kind of very difficult to kind of break down every little thing that doesn't quite make sense in the film. People, I would just urge people to go watch it if they haven't watched it, or go watch it again if they didn't.
Again, people, calm down at the back. That was not a fart. Not a fart. Definitely ketchup. May have been a fart.
If they hadn't watched it for 20 years. But, like, while it is, in its own way, a parody on the MTV generation, it also has this, like, wonderful, just joyous appreciation, I think, for, like, the anarchy of that. Like, a lot of people, when they talk about MTV, they talk about, oh, do you remember how cool MTV was at the beginning, where it had, like, weird fucked up animation and, like, mad logos and all the rest of it? Because there was something anarchic about it. And this movie has that. It might be parodying like the pretension of some of the music videos, especially with like the German prog rock band.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, the song "Baby Doll." Oh no, I think they were
with all the keyboard players.
No, they were from Sweden because John Cornelius says they've sold more records in Sweden than ABBA.
Right. But they're very, they're like Kraftwerk or one of those bands.
Cube Squared Baby Doll.
But that music video where he's throwing paint and feathers over them, it's hilarious.
Or like the guy who did the actual music for it. It's very like, it's all the, I guess the bad stuff about Devo, or like the misconceptions. It's very like Devo-esque, but like in a bad way, kind of. You know what I mean? Mark Mothersbaugh did that music actually, so
yeah. So, what kept you coming back? Like, what's your favorite thing about the film, and what are some of your favorite scenes?
So I think, well, one thing, I'm very nostalgic. So whenever, it was definitely a movie when I first graduated from college and moved to New York City, fairly right after. My first job was pretty hectic, very stressful. And like, I would always just anticipate the weekend when I didn't have, well, sometimes I had to work, but basically I anticipated the weekend, which, the older I get, that's no judgment, that's just not, it's kind of a sad existence to some degree. It's not the best, and I know there's other people out there like that, so that's why I want to say I judge, but it's like,
right,
you should enjoy every day, honestly. But I do remember like late, just staying up, till 3-4 a.m. Friday night, and like just putting on Tapeheads, and it would make me laugh and kind of make me forget about, how stressful this past week was, and it would also, bring me back to high school and when I first discovered that movie, and make me think of Amherst, because I'm very much I have a lot of hometown pride. I'm one of those guys, so.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. As far as like specific scenes, like, well, for example, when, go back to the randomness of the movie, when the woman they share the loft with just suddenly, breaks out nunchucks to fight with the kind of sleazy woman who breaks out a switchblade. Like, just out of, and like the way the camera just starts, like it just pans.
Yeah.
It's almost like a serious shot, and then it keeps panning, and then it cuts to Tim Robbins, and he's like, 2 ninja bitches are about to fight, or so, whatever that line was. It's just like, where did that come from? That's so random. Yeah.
But it's totally a Wayne's World movie. I mean, if you think of the Wayne's World 2 with Cassandra's father, the great James Hong,
I didn't even think
like
about
it's
that.
totally
That's
like
true.
that to some extent. Oh, it's certainly within the spirit of that. Again, let's not. I'm not saying it's a direct rip, but
no. And also just how like little things too, because I'm always like, my thing about what makes a classic comedy is the smaller kind of intermediate laughs in between the big stuff that you see in the trailer and all that stuff. It's like all the little stuff in the background. Because that makes it cohesive, because it's like you have your big laugh, and then you have your like, wait, what is that? What is, like, that kind of keeps you going until the next big laugh. So it's like,
like the parking tickets. Like
I was
every
just gonna
time
say, throughout the movie, as they're driving, their parking tickets just build and build and build. So yeah, exactly. So it's little things like that. Gosh, I'm trying to rack my brain now. What's some other good scenes?
Well, I like the fact. I also like the fact, in a weird way, that in the 80s, nothing really sort of seems off limits, and that mixture of, on one hand, like parody or spoof comedy can also go with like madcap, can also go with like wisecracks, can also kind of all been thrown in together. A film like Airplane is just all spoof parody comedy, and it's fantastic, and it has slapstick elements and other stuff, but like something like Tapeheads does like a little bit of everything, and it's wonderful.
It's totally like an 80s movie where like by the end everybody's running away from something,
right?
Almost in like a Three Stooges, like a Benny Hill kind of way, like, whoa, we gotta get out of here, like it's that kind of thing. So like it makes fun of that humor, but then there's also genuine humor also. Yeah, it does everything in terms of like in the comedy genre at least, so yeah.
And I also love the fact that it's not afraid, the whole subplot about the politician who's running for president, like his perversion in the film, which is like basically the women around him being like dressing up like fairy tale characters, essentially, or
calling
Disney
her
characters,
mommy or something like that. Yeah,
and him kind of like being dressed up as a unicorn or something. Like it's totally. It's definitely the fetish you would pick to make fun of because it is like funny and silly and weird and whatever. But it's also kind of certainly with modern eyes, because they never put crap like that in movies these days, unless it's going to be like, oh, look how dark and edgy we're doing. Our character wears leather.
It would be something serious.
The fact that they can just like throw away, have their stuff in a movie is I kind of find it like liberating to watch, and it sort of says kind of sad things about where we are now, that you look back at an 80s movie like this and you're liberated by the fact that you're being bombarded by kind of all this stuff, and it's like the best of humanity, the worst of humanity, the weirdness of humanity. It's like all this, you know, it's definitely a movie that like celebrates the right thing and makes a joke of the wrong thing. But
well, what's sad is we're kind of in that now. Like the character Clu Gallagher, the politician Clu Gallagher plays, is very Trump-esque. There's that press conference where they're talking about, of course it's the 80s, so we're talking about Gorbachev, and he talks about like a dick measuring, literally a dick measuring contest, which is something Donald Trump would, I feel like he's had to have alluded to that. If not, it's his hands that he has issues with, which is obviously a competence he's talking about. It's deeper. So, you know, he's
it was him and Mark Rubio.
Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio.
Yeah.
It was him.
And here's another random thing that just came to me. His campaign commercial with the little kids, like at the end of it, he just starts handing them out cigarettes. So it's just like, it's just stuff like that. Like, what? Wait, what? Yeah.
And it's weird. It's almost like, you know, if you didn't discover this movie in the 80s or in the early 90s on video, almost the year to discover this movie is now, because
I agree.
It certainly has that undercurrent, and you know. There have been plenty of, you know, disgusting sexual allegations against our current politicians that certainly play into this movie as well. And I think there's also that idea, like, I always like the 80s stuff because you start to get technology coming into it, like camcorders being more readily available, and sort of that idea of the self-made artist or creator or whatever being able to go out and do their own thing. And to some extent, the internet is that for us, you know what I mean? Like, we want to start a movie website, boom, we have a movie website, and no one can tell us what we put on it and how we do it, and so there's that synergy, or that's a pretentious word, but you know what I mean? There's that kind of like a similarity between the two things as well, I think.
Well, what you do here, I mean, I know you have equipment and whatnot, but at the same time, just like your phone and app, and we're recording now, you know what I mean? So, whereas like the idea of a podcast, so obviously relying on the internet, so it was like, if you have a radio show,
right?
Maybe you could do like the pump up the volume deal and you know, do the Christian Slater, but other than that, like to get your voice out, you know, like you do like a fanzine or something like hand printed, you know, all 20, 30 copies, but yeah, it's a lot easier now. But
I wish the Swanky Modes had toured after this movie.
Totally.
I wish
they could have done something with that.
They definitely could have done. Yeah. Although after being with Sam and Dave and then breaking up, Sam might have just been like, I ain't taking on another partner and dealing with that again. I don't know, but
man, that's great. I didn't think. I mean, I guess I did, but not to the depth that you put it to. Like just the DIY kind of like, you got a camcorder, let's do it. Because I think there's this kind of misconception from, I guess, younger people, and I'm not trying to be like the know-it-all older guy, but it's just like the whole idea. That's all right.
I love being a know-it-all grumpy older guy.
The whole idea of like, now that there's like an iPhone, now I can make a movie and all this stuff, but it's like, just because it's small. I mean, camcorders were, you know, big and clunky, but at the time, it was still this like instant thing. Like you could video something and watch it right away, and then there was a lot of cool stuff done on camcorders when they first came out too. So it's kind of this, thank you. Where like just because there weren't iPhones around, nobody could kind of it wasn't DIY, which is not the case at all. So
right. Yeah. No, completely. And I'm just trying to think of there's so many weird scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
The scene where like Tim Robbins finally admits to the girl who we've all known kind of has a thing for.
Yeah, the love interest.
Tim. That he's all like pumped up after like some success at the awards. It's at the award show, isn't it?
Yeah.
So they kind of proceed to start to make out and eventually start making love. And just as they do that, Cusack brings in, like, again, another, like
a
random,
Caribbean band.
Yeah, like 40 people, and they all start
people too,
trashing the place and filming them. And, like, it's a whole... Like, I get it. It's kind of, like, weird and anarchic. But at the same time, you're like, you are filming a friend having sex while, like, people dance around.
Which always reminded me of that scene in The Cable Guy when Broderick hooks up with the woman who he doesn't, at the time, realize is a prostitute. But then they also kind of burst in and see them, and she takes pictures. You know, it's the summer of love. Like, that whole scene it reminds me of Tapeheads.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, the whole thing that just suddenly happens in the movie conveniently, that Tim Robbins' parents have the same car as the hired guns that the president has hired to get the presidential candidate has hired to get his tape back. Mm-hmm. And so there's this really weird scene where the parents show up to their loft to see how they're doing. Sees all this mayhem going on. Tim Robbins in the bath with his girl. He says, "Hi, Mum and Dad." They immediately get in their car and drive away. And then the same car pulls up, and it's the car with all the gunmen in it. Mm-hmm. And this comes back in the end of the movie, where for no reason whatsoever, the only reason to have this complication with the car is so that at the end of the movie, when Tim Robbins' parents show up, his dad gets like dragged out of the car and beaten. I was like, does this character really deserve this?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, his parents weren't the most supportive, but yeah, I think that's overboard. I wanted to say, I felt so accomplished. I sent out a tweet once, because he only has a small role, but Xander Berkeley he has one scene in Tapeheads where he has a bad, terrible British accent. Yeah. But I remember just because he's a guy I didn't even think would be on Twitter, but for some reason I hashtagged his name and he came across it somehow because he's in 3 of my all-time favorite movies: Tapeheads, Heat. He has one scene in Heat, which is actually a callback because Heat was a made-for-TV film called LA Takedown. And he was in. He had a bigger. He was the character Wayne Grow in the made-for-TV. So Michael Mann threw him in, and then Todd Haynes is Safe. He's the husband in Safe. So I had these like 3 images of him in each movie, and I was like, shout out to Xander Berkeley. He's in 3 of my all-time favorite movies, and it's funny too because like Tapeheads, Heat, Safe. It's like Safe is kind of the artsiest of the art house. You know, Tapeheads is like this fun, random, obscure comedy, and Heat is kind of like it was like a commercially successful, film. So it's kind of cool that this one guy was in all 3 of those movies, and so he came across it, and like he retweeted it and was like, "Hey, thanks a lot, man." Because he's definitely one of those like, oh, that guy kind of actors.
Oh, definitely.
So I think he appreciates someone, because that's also like career spanning too. It's like it's like over a decade. Those movies span over a decade, so I'm sure he appreciated that. And I was very starstruck. It's like a lot of people are just like. I want, Kanye to mention me on Twitter or something like that. Like, no, Xander Berkeley acknowledging my tweet, like, made my week. Seriously made my week. Yeah.
To me, and I've said this a lot, but, like, having William Sadler on the show, to me was like having De Niro on the show. Like, to me, it's like, he's up there,
Don't even get me started. Like, it's like, because, like, Hard to Kill and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey were like 2 of those late night movies that used to come on cable. Right. So he's like he's a guy that like I grew up watching, and then like Tales from the Crypt movie. So he's another guy that Demon I just grew up watching him. So that episode is another one. It's like I feel like I'm there with you because like I love Bill Sadler too, and even the conversation that you and your guest had afterwards, like a really good talk about his character on the Star Trek show and all that. Yeah, it's a really great episode. And then, speaking of Xander Berkeley, that scene, there's another random moment that it's one of those things like, I hope people catch, like, when they get their first contract, their first, thing to do a big music video, and it all goes to shit. Yeah. And then, like, the girls start rushing them and saying stuff to them, but then, like, at the end, it's like... Can you sign my butt? Teach me to read? Like, just random, and then the scene just cuts out real quick. The teach me to read part. Because I remember the first time I saw it when I was a kid. I think I was, like 11. Nothing. It wasn't instant then. So I was like, wait, did she say? Why would she say that? She didn't say that. Well, not when I was a kid. When I was in high school, and then I watched it again. I was like, oh, she did say that. She did say teach me to read. So it was like such a random thing to throw in.
It's just. I couldn't help, like, when I finished the movie, have such admiration for it. Yeah. And then admiration in turn that there was a decade when you could get that made. Like, the closest we really have to that now is probably Anchorman in terms of its disregard for the form. Yes, there is a story throughout Anchorman, but like ultimately it's a series of scenes in which they improv about a variety of different things.
They made a whole other movie out of the outtake from the first Anchorman.
Right. In fact, they cut actual plot out of the first Anchorman to make it even more weird and anarchic, because they had the whole time clock wake up gang or whatever they were called subplot, which completely gets thrown out. But also, like, Anchorman doesn't have any a scene can start and we know what the scene's going to be, but there'll be 2 minutes of just non sequitur madness, and then the scene plays out as it would do in a normal film, and then at the end there'll be some coda to it.
And there's a great connection there, because Tim Robbins having his cameo in the first Anchorman movie is pretty awesome too.
It is.
And that's funny too, because Anchorman, I haven't watched that in years, but what still stays with me, it's like I just watched it every time. There's another random throwaway line is Luke Wilson, and he's like, "I am gonna straight up murder your ass." Just the way he delivered. It's not even about his arm getting cut off. It's the delivery of that line, because there's a lot of stuff it's not exactly Robert Altman-esque, but he kind of says it quietly. Like, there's a lot of noise going around, so for like, it's such a well thought out like line of dialogue to say to someone. It's like, I'm gonna straight up murder your ass. I just love that line.
And it's sort of a clunky line of dialogue if you don't get it right.
Exactly.
There's almost too many words in it.
I'm a big, I don't know if I'm the biggest, but I'm a big Luke Wilson fan. He's one of those guys that, like, for the most part, he can do no wrong. He might be in stuff that I'm not necessarily a fan of, but there's still a lot of stuff that I'll watch that he's in. Like, Blue Streak is a movie that I get into a lot of debates about, because I'm like, it's not even Martin Lawrence. Martin Lawrence is funny, but Luke Wilson makes that movie for me. Luke Wilson kind of quietly overshines Martin Lawrence, who's a tough guy to overshine, given how he likes to, his delivery of stuff. So.
Completely. And I'm a big... I like Owen Wilson when he works with Wes Anderson. I can't say that I particularly like Owen Wilson outside that, but like Luke Wilson is definitely one of those guys you can put in a movie and he'll make it better than its initial intention. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm gonna cut you off. I don't know if Owen Wilson has, as far as like performance-wise, has done better than Bottle Rocket. I think Bottle Rocket is like, I love that movie very much, but I don't know if that's like might be his best performance. I love Bottle Rocket so much.
I like him in Life Aquatic. It's not necessarily his movie, but like he's very good in Life Aquatic.
Yeah, he is.
So it got me thinking, because one of my favorite 80s movies is The Burbs. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's one of those. If you ask most people, they're going to say Splash. If it's Tom Hanks. The odd person might say Big or Volunteers, or although even Volunteers is probably a little rare at this point. Man with One Red Shoe, things like that. But like, to me, The Burbs is another movie where it shouldn't work, but it works on every single level, and it's so incredibly well done. And I kind of look through. I'm a big fan, and I've said this before, but I'm a big fan of Howard the Duck. I know a lot of people aren't, but I'm a big fan of that movie because I think that it's
got its audience, though. Like, it's one of those things. Yeah, when it first came out, it was like, what the hell is this? But over the years, you're not as alone as you think.
Right.
But
I'm not doing it ironically. Like, I've always genuinely loved it since I was a kid.
Yeah, there's people who love it, like, and that's another thing. I hate. I don't know. I think the term hipster is kind of played out now, but at the same time, one thing that is very hipstery is when it's like to like something cynically, and my whole thing is like, so do you like this or do you not like? I'm confused. Like, are you making fun of it or do you genuinely like it? And that gets very confusing. But
no. There was a list that went around recently on the internet, and it had just like, what's your favorite this, what's your favorite that, and one of them was like, what's your favorite guilty pleasure, what's your favorite bad movie, and what's your favorite secret movie that you secretly like. And to each of those answers, I was like, first of all, if I like it, it's not a bad movie. Secondly, because I like it. Like, it's all subjective. Secondly, if you like something and it gives you pleasure, don't feel guilty about it, unless what is giving you pleasure is attacking another human being, in which case feel very guilty about it. And then thirdly, the whole like, I secretly love this movie, but I don't tell anyone. Like, an example was my friend James Sato, and I'm sure he feels the same way I do, but James, who's been on the podcast, he put Must Love Dogs, right? Which for a guy to admit, like, oh, I like must-love dogs,
Yeah.
would to the general populace seem weird. To me, I'm like, I totally get why you like must-love dogs. I've seen must-love dogs and I kind of like it. But I don't have any secret loves anymore. I learned through doing the show, definitely, and through having the website, that the only way to do anything is to be truthful about it, open about it, and own it.
Yeah, I'm getting that way the older I get. Like, just the most recent written piece that's on Pinland Empire right now is about my, no longer secret love of Alan Rudolph's Breakfast of Champions.
Right.
Where it's like, from a practical standpoint, that movie is actually very Tapeheads-esque.
Yeah.
It's very random. It's a disaster. Like, a lot of the actors are just overdoing it. I think the whole premise behind it was very pretentious. And I discovered Kurt Vonnegut's book after watching the movie, and then I read the book and I was like, oh, this movie definitely didn't get it right. But then for some reason, over the years, I've been giving away a lot of DVDs to make room, selling a lot of DVDs, but my Breakfast of Champions DVD still remained in my collection. I could have given away at any point, and then I rewatched it again in my adult years, and it's like, there's certain things about this movie that work, and that's kind of why, like, it stays with me. So I just kind of wrote this thing about how, like, yeah, there's a lot of things that got wrong, but there's still something about it that I just love and respect. So it's
of course, and a lot of the movies that were trashed, I mean, for years, certainly in the 90s, there was a lot of film journalism that was talking about, like, the big flops of the 80s, and it was always Baron Munchausen and Howard the Duck and movies like that. And you go down the list, even Heaven's Gate and stuff, you go down the list, and you think to yourself, like, all right, not one of the movies on this list is a perfect movie, but you'll be hard-pressed to find a perfect movie. But each one of the films on this list is so insanely inventive and so insanely creative and so has a whole bunch of stuff going on in it. I mean, weirdly enough, talking Tapeheads and Howard the Duck, the only thing I don't like about Howard the Duck is Tim Robbins' character. I think he's very irritating in that.
Sure.
And I was worried that in Tapeheads he was going to be more like that, and he wasn't.
He's a little more toned down.
Like, I like him in Tapeheads. In Howard the Duck, he's the one part of it that I'm not a fan of. I love Jeffrey Jones, I love Howard himself, I love Leah Thompson, I like all the insanity that's going on around them. But I'm not a big fan of Tim Robbins' like kind of goofy shtick that he does in that film. But you know, like I say, nothing's going to be perfect, and it's similar with like Baron Munchausen should be now look back on it as one of Terry Gilliam's masterpieces. I mean, it's absolutely, considering the situation it was made under. It's insanely good. And
see, I was not a little kid, but still a kid when that came out, and it's also interesting to not be at that age, to kind of have this like more pure outlook where I didn't know about flops or anything like that. Where I just thought, oh, this movie must have done well at the box office. It was good. You know, like I didn't even know about like to pick up like a magazine and read a review. It's just like you go to the movies with your friends to see it, and like you see a theater full of people. Like you don't even think about flops or anything like that. So it's interesting to think about Baron Munchausen. You know.
Completely. No, I mean, and you either grew up loving, like I was a Python head, so therefore everything that came out that was Gilliam, I watched, loved, bought, you know, repeatedly. And no, I've never put any stock in it. I'm just, it's just more that I think if there is a, while the 70s definitely has, if you want to be strokey beard about it, there is a certain highbrow and quality and depth to the films from the 70s, no doubt. But if you want to talk about like the unbridled joy of creativity and the unbridled joy of discovery, because the other thing that happens in the 80s is essentially the discovery of special effects, like right from the very early or late 70s really to the early 80s discovery of kind of stuff where they're using more blue screen, and there's even some, like Wrath of Khan has the first digital animation in it, and
does it? I didn't know that.
The Genesis project with the planet and the terraforming that's happening, all that was the first computer generated. You know, right through to a movie like in the early 90s, like Army of Darkness, that has rear projection, animatronics, special makeup effects, the stop frame animation. Like it has everything in that movie, like map paintings, and like it's just throwing everything at the wall. And you look at Nightmare on Elm Street is almost a prime example. You go from a movie that has some very clever shots and some good effects in the first one, to like just an unbridled like orgasm of effects by the time you get to like 4 or 5, where it's just like, sky's the fucking limit. Let's do whatever we want. And you can chart that through a comedy like Tapeheads, through a comedy like The Burbs, through even stuff like the fact that they went ahead and made a Garbage Pail Kids the movie.
Man.
They just went ahead and did it.
That's
you know what I mean?
VHS that I still own.
Right.
It's in my grandmother's basement with my other VHSs.
Critters and Ghoulies and the Puppet Master series. And there's all this stuff where people are just going, we have all this shit available now. Let's make some wild stuff.
Well, there's touches of that in that Roscoe's video that Tim Robbins
that
does
little,
when the chicken starts to dance. It's like this claymation, kind of thing. That's like really cool,
Yeah, look at that reminded me quite kind of in a sick way of, because in this just to explain for people who haven't seen it, in this music video for a chicken restaurant, which there's no way they could have filmed it, because it would have cost them thousands.
Exactly.
They have 2 animated breaded chicken wings who are kind of dancing on a plate. And it reminded me of that scene in Dead Heat, the Joe Piscopo, Treat Williams zombie cop movie, where they have the reanimation machine goes off in the back room of a Chinese restaurant, and all the ducks and everything start coming alive. And
one of my favorite side-by-sides that got no love was, I did the shot in the dancing chicken shot, from Tapeheads. I compared it to, there's a scene in Eraserhead where they go to sit down for dinner, and the chickens start moving. But I think that's one of the things too, where not a lot of people know who Tapeheads is, so it didn't get the amount of attention that say my other movie comparisons are. But it was one of those things where like, that's what it was. I hashtagged Tapeheads, and somehow it got, I didn't tag because I didn't know Tim Robbins was on Twitter, but Tim Robbins retweeted it and still didn't get a lot of retweets. After a big celebrity retweets something, 1 million people. But the fact that like Tim Robbins saw it, I took some comfort in it.
Of course, no.
Yeah.
And I've got a feeling that if you, it's like when I started to bring up Hard to Kill and stuff with William Sadler, and he starts to go, there was a sort of 80s and 90s action boom, you're right, and he sort of started to get into the interview at that point. It's because I wasn't talking to him yet about Shawshank, and I wasn't talking to him about Bill and Ted yet. I was talking about one of those movies, and I feel like if you sat down with John, because I feel like Jon Cusack now at this point has become utterly cynical and morose and just kind of slobs around in his all black attire and decides, I'm just going to do the next Netflix thing that allows me to, sit in Chicago and with my Ramones t-shirt on and watch the Cubs or whatever. Or hang out with Johnny Depp and Hunter S. Thompson.
Or hang out with Tim Robbins. They've collaborated quite a bit. They're very close.
But I feel like if you sat him down right now, Jon Cusack, and you mentioned Tapeheads with the love and passion that you have for it, I feel like even old, cynical, miserable Cusack would suddenly light up and be like, that was a movie, man, that was a movie.
Two of my greatest, these are real quick. I saw Matt Dillon on the train once, and he told me he had the fisherman's hat on, like he did not want to be noticed. And of course, I noticed him, and he noticed that I noticed him, and right away, he didn't have any qualms about being, oh, jeez, this guy sees me, he's going to come over. So I came over, I did want to shake his hand, but before, he had his hand extended already just to be like, all right, yeah, like to get it over with. And I was just like, I know, I don't want to, I see you with the hat on, I don't want to bother you. It's just, My Bodyguard is one of my most favorite movies ever. So I went to go away, and he held onto my hand and yanked me. He's like, what did you say? And I thought I said something, I thought I did something wrong. And I was like, no, My Bodyguard, the movie, when you're a little kid. And I loved it. He was just like, oh wow, and he had just the most natural grin came on his face, because that was literally the second movie he ever did, you know what I mean? And then I went and sat back down, and then midway into the tree, he didn't get off right away. He looked over at me, smirked again, damn, My Bodyguard, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then again, this is back when Tower Records was still around in Union Square. I saw Martin Donovan going through the DVD section, and I guess to most people, Martin Donovan would be known he was the father in Saved or that show Weeds. But he's a regular
My friend
actor.
Jim loves Martin Donovan. The guy who regularly does the show loves Martin.
Well, then he must be a Hal Hartley fan, because he's probably, after Bill Sage, he's the second most used actor that Hal Hartley has used.
Right.
So I went up to him, and then this was around the time when Weeds was on, or maybe some SVU rerun he might have been known from. But I was just like, hey man, I love your work with Hal Hartley, your role in the movie Trust. I thought it was Oscar-worthy if you care about, awards or whatnot. And then it was just almost identical to Matt Dillon. He was just like, wow, whoa, Trust. Like, he hadn't thought, he still works with Hal Hartley, but just that random movie from 1990. And then again, he's still sorting through his CDs, what he wants to buy, and then, like, he looks over at me and, like, has the same smirk, like, damn, he probably wasn't even thinking about that, to have some random guy come up to you and say that. So, yeah, moments like that are the best. Definitely. And I agree with you. If John Cusack, all the, talk about holding the boombox over your head. I'm sure that's a special movie to him, too, but something like Tapeheads, he would totally be like, oh, let's get into it, because he's a music lover. I'm sure there were, like fun kind of chaos on the set. He got to make a movie with one of his best friends, too.
The After Movie Diner with Jon Cross will return right after this.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
This podcast takes no shortcut in producing outstanding content. How they haven't become more widely recognized is beyond me.
I love this show. Smart commentary, in-depth interviews, and great production.
It's obvious how serious these guys take their podcast and bring that next level of professionalism that anyone would be hard-pressed to match.
There are few things better in life than listening to people who are both passionate and knowledgeable about their subject matter. The Projection Booth, with their wide and wild range of film discussions, is one of those things. Simple as that.
The Projection Booth is the highest quality film podcast around. I love the focus on cult films, witty, informative banter, and amazing interviews. The Projection Booth is the best podcast out there if you're a serious film lover.
The Projection Booth Podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
Hello, folks. This is a promo for a podcast called The Chris and Chris Show. I'm Chris with a C.
And I'm Chris with a K. The Chris and Chris Show is a movie podcast where myself and my colleague, Chris with a C,
hello,
discuss our thoughts on films from a wide variety of genres, all in our own inimitable style.
Here's what the masses are saying about the show. Funny, irreverent film analysis.
Reviews are great and spot on. Subscribe now.
The Chris and Chris Show is a slickly produced and fun podcast with two gents who have great chemistry.
They sound like two old men.
I don't read that one.
Oh, sorry. Keeps me intrigued and keeps me entertained.
There you have it. What are you waiting for? Head on over to www.waffles.
The audio equivalent of Distillery.
Stop reading the bad ones. What are you doing? Anyway, head on over to wafflefm.com. That's WAFUFM.com to check out the show or subscribe to The Chris and Chris Show on iTunes.
Or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Chris and Chris Show. That's Chris with a C, Chris with a K.
Lovely.
The biggest load of I've ever heard.
What are you doing?
We'll do it live. It. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Hi, I'm Jay Mayo.
And I'm Marie.
Shut up.
I'm Marie.
Shut up.
I'm Marie Forster.
And we are co-hosts of Hold the Mayo podcast.
Hold the Mayo.
Hold the Mayo. All right, give me ham on 5. Hold the Mayo.
We're two local comedians, and here on Hold the Mail, we talk about all the different things that are going on in our daily lives.
Or in your case, your pathetic dating life.
Or in your case, your obsession with pizza.
Or in your case, your Gatham for Statham.
Yeah? Well, at least I'm not obsessed with Guy Fieri.
At least I'm a gang leader.
No, you're not. You're just always trying to overthrow invisible gangs.
No, I'm cool in the gang.
No, oh my God, the puns are the worst.
Mayonnaise, really? That stuff is for sandwiches.
Listen, you guys can find us all across the internet. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, and everywhere else that podcast can be found. You can also find us all across social media. We're on Twitter at Hold the Mail Pod, Instagram at Hold the Mail Podcast, and of course, we have a Facebook fan page, facebook.com/Hold the Mail Podcast.
Don't forget, you can also find Jay crying on his couch every single night.
Thank you so much.
F***ing thing sucks.
And just end it with a fart.
You're listening to the sweet sounds of the After Movie Diner. Support us at patreon.com/After Movie Diner. Or I'll punch you in the teats. Rate and review us on iTunes, Earthling.
It's like one of my favorite Tim Robbins films is The Cradle Will Rock. And I feel like that's one that hasn't been seen a lot. But it's
Which one is that?
The Cradle Will Rock. It's the one about Orson Welles putting on the musical at the time when a lot of people were just about to kind of get blacklisted. And it has Frida's boyfriend who painted the mural in the Rockefeller Plaza, and it was all about communism and da-da-da-da-da.
Alfred Molina?
No, Alfred Molina plays him in the movie Frida, but like in Diego Rivera.
Oh, Diego Rivera. Oh, right.
The character, sorry. And it's played by a different character in this, but he's painting the mural. John Cusack plays Rockefeller. Susan Sarandon's in it. Tenacious D are in it. Bill Murray is in it. Joan Cusack is in it. Hank Azaria is in it. Carrie Elwes is in it. Like it's an incredible.
I'm writing this down right now,
and it's about a musical that they all put on in New York, and it's back when Orson Welles was a young guy. And it's a great, great film, but I'm sure like no one talks to Tim Robbins about The Great War. I'm sure they all talk about Shawshank Redemption and or maybe in what was the one he directed with Sean Penn? Won the Oscar for
Dead Man Walking.
Dead Man Walking. I'm sure they talk about that one, but
Exactly.
to me, like I put on Incredible Rock. I love the cast. I'm a fan of musicals. I think it's really beautifully shot. I love the time period. So no, but I think Tapeheads is one of those that is aching for a rediscovery. So if this podcast at all pushes people towards watching it, I would strongly suggest it. And I would
in this very city though to have like theaters like say Alamo, Nighthawk, IFC. Some of the midnight movies that they've shown I think are more obscure than Tapeheads. So why not show like there's plenty like a music movie retrospective or like a Tim Robbins or a John Cusack kind of thing. Like Tapeheads would fit in. It's such a midnight movie. I think like it's one of those things like at a sold out crowd. It's one of those movies where you don't mind if there's talking during the watching of it because the talking has to do with the movie. It's not like a conversation about whatever.
But it would totally be a movie that I would program if I was one of those guys.
Absolutely.
I would program it as a double bill with Be Kind Rewind. Like that. That would be my double bill. That would be my.
Have you seen the movie Roadside Prophets?
No, I haven't. No.
It's very much some of the same bit part actors in. I think there has to be a stronger connection. A lot of the bit part people in Tapeheads are in Roadside Prophets. It's a movie. It's John Doe from the band X.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, he's the guy who gets fired at the beginning of Roadhouse when Patrick Swayze comes in to clean house.
Right.
And Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys.
Yeah.
And they take a motorcycle cross-country trip. It's like an updated Easy Rider, but it's not. But it's another movie where it's like there's a plot, but it's a total like cameo fest because like David Carradine plays this like druggy guitarist. Stephen Tobolowsky has a great cameo. It's all these weird like one scene kind of things. Arlo Guthrie is in it. Timothy Leary. It's a really like cool movie. Came out in 91 or 92, and it's a really weird movie, but it's totally in the same vein as Tapeheads. I think you would dig it.
It sounds to me like one of there's another really rare film that we've mentioned a lot on the show, just because it's another one that I love to like put out there for people to watch, and that's Candy Mountain. Have you heard of this?
No.
Film? So it has cameos by, I think there may even be a version of it on YouTube, but I have the VHS because it's never been released on DVD or Blu-ray. I forget who the lead guy is, but you would recognize him instantly. He's like a real that guy. But it's about a guy who's traveling through the U.S. to get to Harris Yulin, of all people, who plays a world-famous reclusive guitar builder. And along the way, this guy bumps into Joe Strummer, Tom Waits, Dr. John, a very deep-voiced crooner guy with mustache glasses. Oh, damn it. I got to think about it. He sings that. It's kind of funny. Leon Redbone. Who else is in the movie? And Harris Yulin is like the guy at the end, but it's like mad road trip, and it's totally like this low budget thing, and it must have been funded by a guy who like knew all these musicians, but they each have a scene, like none of them interact with each other. It's very sort of Jarmusch-esque in a weird way. And it's fantastic. It's definitely.
I was just gonna say, you're saying all that because it reminds me of Straight to Hell, the Alex Cox movie, which has Jarmusch in it, but also has Joe Strummer is in it. So it seems like a lot of just the Tom Waits thing because I'm one of those guys where I'm not so much now, but when I was a teenager in my early 20s, I was embarrassed to say because I don't listen to that music. I thought Tom Waits was an actor.
Right.
And then I remember I was working in a video store in my early 20s, and this guy was like, "Do you have any movies with Tom Waits in it?" And then I was like, "Oh yeah, he's a good actor. He's like better musician." I was like, "Oh, he's a musician?" And the look on the guy's face was like, it's so backward. He's like,
right.
He's a great musician. Yeah, he does acting on the side, but yeah. And I was like, oh. But then I went back and I realized like he does his music was I guess I didn't realize I knew the voice, even some of his music, like...
well, in Down by Law, he does 2 or 3 songs, and even some of the music in Down by Law.
Exactly, but even then, I'm a huge Jarmusch fan. I thought that was just like, oh, he's one of those guys that does it all. I thought he was like, his main thing was acting.
Yeah.
Because, by that point, I had known all about, Tom Waits through the Jarmusch stuff.
Yeah.
But then, like, he did some of the music for Smoke and all that stuff, and then when I was like, oh, that guy, oh, that boy, okay, makes sense.
Yeah, like, one of his songs shows up in 12 Monkeys. Like, his like, music is throughout various different movies, but so I don't know, do you have like sort of 5 or 6 other films that kind of fall into the vein of Tapeheads? I feel like there are a lot of those kind of undiscovered weird wacky comedies from the 80s.
Well, I mean, I guess I'll repeat myself in the sense of Roadside Prophets, because that's another movie that I really want people to
check out,
rediscover. I'd say Straight to Hell. So do you want more like lesser known movies, or
I feel like Tapeheads is, like we said earlier, people will know The Sure Thing and they'll know Say Anything, but they wouldn't necessarily know Tapeheads or Better Off Dead. So it's kind of like people know John Candy from Uncle Buck, but they don't necessarily know Armed and Dangerous, or they don't necessarily know Going Berserk, or...
Okay, so then I got a couple. Okay. This is related to... John Cusack's not in it, but it's a very random 80s movie directed by a guy he's synonymous with, Savage Steve Holland. It's a film called How I Got Into College.
Right.
Have you seen that before?
Yeah, who is in that again? Who's the lead guy in it? I
forgot his name. It's like, but I know Laura Flynn Boyle is the female lead.
Isn't it the dude
Corey
who's now
something.
on... Oh, okay. Maybe it's a different movie I'm thinking about then.
But
it's not the guy who's now on NCIS, is it?
No.
He did a college movie though, like I Got Into College movie.
Oh yeah, definitely. But this is like It's
I'm getting confused between the two of them.
No, well, there were a lot of those in the 80s. But How I Got Into College, and there's another regular actor that Savage Steve Holland works with, Curtis Armstrong.
Yes,
I know. Yeah, he has a great scene, in that film, and
Booger,
also
right?
Booger. Oh, absolutely Booger. So How I Got Into College. What was another? Oh, in the same vein, we're talking about Straight to Hell. This is a more forgotten about Alex Cox movie, which I guess after Walker, a lot of his movies got forgotten about. But
after Repo Man, I think
the Three Businessmen is which he's actually in. He actually acts in it along with his regular buddy Miguel Sandoval, who's in. I think he's in every Alex Cox movie, and another actor. So that's another random movie. So I'd say those. Those are all in the Tapeheads vein. So.
And I think you and probably and I don't know if you know the gentleman, but he's been a follower of mine for ages, and we're good friends on Facebook. And he does his own the Swedish cinemasochist, Philip O'Neill, who he also used to like write into Schlock Treatment sometimes and other things like that. But Philip and you, I think, are the only people I know who have delved into like later Alex Cox stuff. And as someone who is certainly a passing fan of Repo Man and Cinemancy, I can't say that I'm a huge fan of either, but I certainly like both those movies that people know about. Is his later stuff worth delving into, and where does no?
Although, well, like I said, the Three Businessmen,
right?
But Repo Girl, which was like a sequel to Repo Man, it looked like the whole movie. It's like you could see the green screen,
right?
I can't even describe. Yeah, it's not
surprising he's still out there though, isn't it?
More so now. He's a film critic, which I've always appreciated too. No matter what you say about his career, I like filmmakers with an opinion. There's a lot of stroke jobs and a lot of I love everything. Whereas like him, and he really dissects. I think if you see a lot of his movies, on the surface, they're very silly and just thrown together, but like the way his cinematic mind, and he likes everything. Yeah. He also dislikes a lot, but he also likes everything. I like, and that's kind of my fascination. Not so much like his later movies it's just him. Yeah. He's a guy who he's been handed stuff over and over. He's screwed himself because he has that. He's one of those guys who like there's that passionate, romantic kind of view of like, oh, the indie DIY filmmaker who does it all his own, which I guess goes back to John Cassavetes and goes through like a Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah.
But for some people, that attitude didn't work for everybody. And he's one of those guys where it didn't work. He was just like, no, I want to do it my way. And studios are like, well, forget you. And then he tries to get money on his own and he just can't do it. And I find that fascinating too. It's like kind of the losing story of that whole like maverick, bullheaded, filmmaker. And I do find it interesting too that like he does Repo Man and Sid and Nancy, and then like he does Walker, that was a disaster, but he still made all these movies. He got so many chances, you know what I mean? And he just, even into the late 90s, he could have had another revival with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and he kind of screwed that over himself. That, that was on him. And
he screwed that twice, because he screwed it initially with the directing gig, but then he screwed it by suing them for the screenplay, and it's like all the stuff that was similar between him and Gilliam's script was from the book.
Exactly.
So Gilliam had to do this whole thing at the beginning of the movie where he says, I didn't write this, Alex Cox didn't write this, Hunter S. Thompson wrote it.
Sure.
Because vast chunks of that movie are just straight out of Hunter's book. It just is. Mm-hmm. And as it should be, it is what it is, whether you love that movie or not. But I have to get in touch with that guy then, because I love. He's the guy. Alex Cox is the guy I love talking about, and there's not a lot of people who want to talk about him. Philip's been doing some really interesting things lately because he puts up everything he watches on Facebook, and he's been going through he recently watched every Bogdanovich movie, and I'm like, I had no idea Bogdanovich had made anywhere near the number of movies that Philip found, and he went through and he watched all of Alex Cox movies, and he kind of picks a director and then just watches 20 of his movies, and I'm always impressed by that. I can't do it. I'm too eclectic. I'm too what's the ADD? Is it? I don't know. But I have to. If you look at my Letterboxd account where I keep a diary of what I watch,
I can only imagine.
It goes from horror to thriller to action to comedy to I can't stick to the same thing. So I'm always impressed by that. But no, what I was going to say about Alex Cox was growing up in England, and I'm not sure this would translate, but we never had horror hosts. We never had a guy who would come on and present an old 50s movie and then interrupt it with bad puns
Joe
or whatever.
Briggs kind of
a Joe Bob Briggs or a Count Cordoval or Sven Gulli and all those people. We never had that.
Wow.
But we had a series on BBC Two, which was the smaller, artier, more thank you, more kind of smaller and less appreciated younger brother to BBC One, which was the big highbrow, big populist station. And BBC Two kind of showed little quirky comedy things and documentaries and nature things and stuff like that. But occasionally they had this series called Movie Drome, and the original host to Movie Drome was Alex Cox, and he would come on, and it was normally in a darkened room with a film projector in the background and a little cigarette ashtray, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he looks weird, and
he's a gaunt, kind of skinny guy
with his big mole, and he's talking to the camera about these movies. And this is how I got to see growing up, because none of my family are into movies at all, but it's how I got to see films like Westworld and Demon Seed and films like that he would play films like that were very they were rare at the time but accessible because they were genre films, and he wasn't being pretentious about them. He was just this is a really kick-ass movie, you have to watch this. Julie Christie gets possessed by a electronic devil and blah 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 blah, there's all this stuff, and he would show more popular stuff as well. And then he stopped hosting Movie Drome. I don't know if he quit it or whether they fired him. But it got taken over by a guy who was actually a movie critic, a critic in capital letters, called Mark Cousins, who is the most dreary, the most pretentious, the most over-the-top. Every film has to be an obscure, black and white, heavily subtitled art house film from Lithuania in 1958. Everything has to be some obscure thing. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm sure the black and white, heavily subtitled Lithuanian movie boom of the 50s was fascinating.
I was going to say, I'm sure there's I guess there's a place for everything, but not the way you describe, like for the show that you described. And I got so excited because I'm not going to act like, I remember that show because I didn't grow up
It's
in
on
the UK.
YouTube. I think his intros are on YouTube.
No, but there's a movie, it's either a Criterion, because Alex Cox has done stuff for the Criterion Collection outside of his own movies, where they showed clips from that show. I just can't remember what movie it was, but Dark Room, yeah.
And I loved, John and I, the other guy who sort of started the show with me way back when, we grew up, that's how we got to see some really, cool 70s mad movies. Yeah. And then Mark Cousins took over, and it was just, dreary central. You were just and it was always funny, because, Alex Cox did it on a sound stage, a little office somewhere where they just filmed him with a single camera, and did about 3 minutes, and then on the movie went on.
Yeah.
Mark Cousins would, fly to Rome and be at the Colosseum and introduce a movie that had nothing to do with anything, and I was just why would you waste all that money to fly this pretentious?
That's the first thing I thought about.
Yeah, he could stand in a room and say this crap. Nobody can. He would be out in the Colosseum, and he'd be like, "So the Three Amigos," and he'd be like, "Why are you in the Colosseum?" Introducing the three. Mark Cousins was always the bane of our existence once he took over. Yeah. But no, Alex Cox has always had a special place in my heart because of that.
Same here.
But I've never kind of gone further with his films. Maybe I should.
Yeah, selective. Yeah, he's got some disasters, and I don't even mean that to kick him when he's down and poke fun of. They really are, and especially if you read up and learn the history behind how certain things were made. It was just, I keep going back to you kind of, as far as where your career is at, you kind of did it to yourself multiple times. So, but that's fascinating to me too. But that story is fascinating to me.
And so the thing about 80s comedies, a Tapeheads thing, is that. It's not a lot of people think of sort of the wacky comedies of the 80s, I guess, fitting in with the romp genre, which of the most famous one is kind of the Police Academies, and the least favorite are sort of, or the least well known are things like Ski School and Hot Dog and things like that are low budget, and I always equate them to slasher films. They're the ugly low budget cousin of comedies.
Yep.
Now I happen to love them. I happen to love slasher films, and I happen to love romps. But I think that stuff like The Sure Thing, Tapeheads, a lot of those kind of movies, they do elevate themselves. Even something like Class with Rob Lowe and Andrew McCarthy. Although essentially it's a romp thing because it's about sex and it's about teenagers and it kind of elevates itself to a certain extent above those, above the ski schools of the world. But I do think there is a rich. I kind of feel like there's a rich vein there to be discovered of these weird little movies.
Oh yeah.
Then they play into the Brat Pack and they become a little bit more aware of themselves, a little bit more serious to some extent. Because as much as I love The Breakfast Club and Cinema's Fire and things like that, they are fully aware of what they're doing, and they're very self-conscious films. They're very look how clever and important and we're being. Unlike Tapeheads, which is look how fucking crazy we are, and probably several executives are doing lines while doing lines.
I was just gonna say, when they, I feel like it was when they said cut, it didn't stop being lively. They said cut, and just fun stuff still continued.
Coke and hookers.
Oh yeah, definitely
Drink
some coke,
and
definitely some drinking
kind of,
too.
Yeah. And I suppose Revenge of the Nerds is another one that's it is a romp because it is what it's about. It's about college and stuff like that. But there's also a certain mad anarchy to it. And I think
the fact that because I went to a historically black
Animal
college,
House, isn't it? That's where it comes from. Yeah.
But I love the little random input of just how it's such an easily forgotten, understood that Lambda is associated with these nerds, but it was a serious black fraternity that people forget about. And I went to Hampton University, historically black college, so it makes me think of all that. And it's they're the ones who save them in the end. They come out. I also have a man crush on Bernie Casey also. So
of course.
You know what I mean? So very true. Yeah, there's a lot of randomness in Revenge of the Nerds.
And I think that and there's other ones like Lampoon used to do a bunch, and then I'm thinking of weird films what's that? Is it Amazon Women on the Moon, that like early one. That, like,
well, that is Amazon Women on the Moon is a movie.
Yeah, like John Landis it's like a movie like with lots of different short films in it, right? Isn't it?
I'm thinking of something else. Then. I mean, I know of Amazon. No, I'm thinking of something else.
And then isn't there like Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death? That's another
I don't know
one.
that one. No, I've heard that one, but wow.
But there's lots of those like movies that are a bit like what the hell. Even the sort of you have like Cannibal Run, everyone knows about, but then you have like the Gumball Rally, which is sort of like the weird, mad B-movie version of Cannibal Run.
Or when I like to, because King of the Kickboxers to Kickboxer.
Right.
I remember begging my father to, like, King of the Kickboxers we're talking about, like, please order this on pay-per-view, please. And he was like, fine. And I remember his commentary throughout was just like, what is this? This is dumb. You know, and like, I'm sure my dad was a Van Damme fan, so he's probably thinking of Kickboxer. Like, it's the same movie, but like, it's not, like, Lauren Avedon's like a goofier Van Damme, Americanized Van Damme, but yeah, that's that immediately comes to mind.
There's another guy who had one hell of a career, considering who he was.
Billy Blanks, and I like the connection of like the whole King of the Kickboxers being such a rip-off of Van Damme films, whereas Billy Blanks and Van Damme work together too. Billy Blanks he doesn't have any speaking lines, but in Lionheart, he's one of the Legionnaires that gets roundhouse kicked before Van Damme escapes. So I like that
that's what's weird is like Billy Blanks shows up in like a ton of films in very sort of small parts. But then outside of that, he's having this like mad career with Rowdy Roddy Piper and their like films that they did together.
But not even, and then like there's people. I remember going to college because like I guess not a lot of folks know about like maybe B movies, but like to a lot of people, he's the Tybo guy.
Yeah,
and it's like no, before Tybo, he was like an action star, well like a B movie or straight to VHS action star. But he was the man. He wasn't some like random personal trainer who like made this series of videos. It's like no, he was an actor first. And some people didn't even know that. I remember in '99, like a roommate, my friend's college roommate, he had those Tybo tapes, and I was saying, he was the man. And like, what do you mean? I was like, he was an actor. What do you mean? Well,
So I do feel like, and I think you hit on it there, with sort of there is the world of A movies in the 80s that everyone knows, whether it's the Indiana Joneses or the Ghostbusters or Back to the Futures or whatever it is, that are rightfully lauded, rightfully loved, because they are also terrific movies. But I definitely think that to really fully enjoy and understand just how weird the 80s got, go one level down. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Go another level down and just sort of find and it's not that like they're all going to be winners, but there's going to be something in each sort of B movie from the 80s that you find.
I was just going to say, even if it's not a winner, there's still some good stuff. There's still going to be a few good things.
There's stuff you'll watch and you'll go, I cannot believe someone put a camera and filmed that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of them I've covered either on this show or on Dr. Action the Kick-Ass Kid, especially the action ones. We watched, Kirk Howley and I did that double bill of weird action movies way back when. One of them starred Greg Henry as an action star. Like, what? And it was called The Patriot, and there's like 8 movies called The Patriot. And Greg Henry did one of them. And we also covered Low Blow with Leo Fong, which is just a completely baffling movie that ever got made. So there's lots of stuff out there, and I always love to praise it. If you have any final thoughts on Tapeheads, now's the time.
I think you put it. You said it all. Try to rediscover it. I'm sure you can get a cheap DVD off of Amazon. It might be even. I mean, so many movies are available to rent on YouTube now for like $1.99. So give it a shot. I mean, if you've listened this far, I'm sure we must have convinced you.
Yes, definitely. And I always
seek it out rather.
Yeah, and I wanted to definitely use it to have this bigger conversation, both about yourself, but also about like the movies from the 80s, because that's what also fascinates me when I discover a film like this for the first time. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. There's these great undiscovered things from the 80s that need to kind of be dug up and praised. But
I'm honored to be on, man. I really appreciate it. It's always weird. Something I've listened to before, and I'll be listening to tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. I've been a listener of the show without being asked to be on. So
no. Well, we've been trying to make this happen. I think for a couple of years. For people who don't know, like I met Marcus through the Schlock Treatment guys, but since Schlock Treatment has ended and their lives have all gone off in other directions, it has been sort of, and also we lost a bar where we all used to hang out. I haven't seen Abby in probably 6 to 8 months since.
We saw a movie a little while back at BAM, but that was like, that was last year. So
right. So I've been trying to get you on the show, but now I feel like we can do this more regularly. It was a real pleasure.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of 2 really cool diners in my neighborhood at Sunset Park. So if you ever want a meal, it's on me and you want to record another episode.
Definitely.
George's Diner on 56th or 57th and 5th. In Sunset Park, it's a great diner.
And whereabouts is Sunset Park from here?
It's in it's like all the way. We're in Williamsburg now, but it's in between Park Slope and Bay Ridge. It's
right. Yeah. All right, yeah. No, that's cool. No, I'll definitely come down. I like one of the things I'm going to try and do with Jim is we're going to probably watch more movies at home separately, and then like try and visit more diners rather than always trying to sort of see a movie and go to a diner on the same night.
Yeah,
that's kind of get a bit.
I ran into you when you were doing one of those. I think it was like 2 years ago when Sam was doing the 80s indie. It was the Alan Rudolph film, wasn't it? With Chris Christopherson.
Yes. Yeah. We just talked about it on the last episode because we went back to Junior's Cheesecake, which is where we went and
still never been. I've never been there before in my life.
I mean it's vastly overpriced, but the single white female episode was recorded there, and we mentioned that because we saw Trouble in Mind. That's what it was. Yeah. Another great
Alan Rudolph is another. He's on the Alex Cox level where it's like, what the hell? Like Breakfast of Champions, Trouble in Mind. He's got some weird ones.
Yeah, because Trouble in Mind again, ostensibly set in Seattle, but not in any kind of time zone and not in any kind of.
No, it's true. But just like Joe Morton's character is just like, who are you? Like just the stuff that comes out of his mouth. It's just like the way he acts. It's like, this is really weird.
And it's definitely got its roots in like beatnik, writing and that kind of stuff. But like, still very, very cool film. Yeah. But no, Marcus, tell everyone where they can find you online and what they should look at.
PinlandEmpire.com. That's kind of the hub of everything. All the other sites that I write for, like The Pink Smoke or the podcast that I appear on regularly called The Wrong Reel, all that stuff is there. So it's like PinlandEmpire.com. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Pinland_Empire. And of course, because the world needs more podcasts, me and my friend, who's a film score composer actually, Scott Thorough, we started a podcast called Zebras in America. If you get that reference, then you will enjoy the podcast. And that's all I'll say about that. But so we it's cool too, because we just finally, after 4 episodes, we're finally up on iTunes today. So Zebras in America, so it's weekly. Before we even launched it, we pre-recorded about 7 episodes. No, not about. We pre-recorded 7 episodes. We're getting together next week to record a couple of more. So it's a weekly podcast where we just talk about film. It's half structured and half not structured. And it just comes from the mind of me being the film critic and Scott being the film score composer, who's done some really good work on some films recently. And we just talk and rap about movies. So
awesome. Yeah, everyone subscribe to that right away, and everyone check out PinlandEmpire.com. Marcus, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, sir.
Oh, man.
And we will definitely do this again.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
You've been listening to the After Movie Diner with your host, Jon Cross.
I love these guys.
Come on. Let's go. Oh, boys. Open up. Let me through.
Presentando